Welcome back to the Broadman Word. And last time we saw the plan of Haman, or the decree that he passed. Well, now we're going to see the response of Esther, and we're going to see this in two separate videos. This one and then the one on Thursday. So this one we're really going to look at how does Esther respond to this decree, and then on Thursday we're really going to look at what I believe is the main verse of the whole entire book, and really kind of talk a little bit about why we don't see the Lord really mentioned in this book and why that is. So, with that being said, go to Esther chapter 4. We're going to look at the whole entire chapter today. So, Esther chapter 4, we're going to start in verse 1. But yeah, Esther chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, which is the decree of Haman, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning amongst the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. So first off, just pause there. Let's talk about sackcloth and ashes, because obviously it has a lot to do with this. Sackcloth and ashes were not it's not a mystical thing in any sort of way. It's not like if they burned their clothes in a specific manner, or they burned incense in a specific manner, then something spiritual and mystical would happen. No, not at all. Sackcloth and ashes is to show that you are literally at the bottom. That this is just the worst. Whatever situation you are going through, this is the worst. You are at your complete lowest. There's not much that you can do except for crying out to God. And Mordecai definitely shows this. And not only him, but other Jews throughout the empire as well, especially, well, within this province, within Susa, they definitely show this level of just mourning and crying. And lamenting is not just crying in itself, but it is crying out to the Lord in hope that he hears and that he intervenes, which he does. Now, again, as we'll talk about on Thursday, he's not mentioned by name here, and how he personally goes about doing it. But yet we see how Esther responds, and we will get to that Thursday. But you see a lot of grief with this upcoming doom that is coming for the Jews because of the decree signed by Haman. But now we get to Esther and her response. Verse 4. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai, so they might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But as for me, I've not been called to come into the king these 30 days. So let's pause there. So you have this back and forth with this attendant named Hathach, and there's this back and forth between Esther and Mordecai, and she wants information, which is telling because within her own house, at the well, at the authority of her own husband, this decree comes forward. So it's interesting to me that even with that being done, she doesn't know about it. And now the phrase at the end there, in at the end of verse 11, I think explains why. It's because she has not been called to be with the king for the last month. And we'll get to that just in a second. But I think that's why you see this really interesting thing. Why would she need all those details? The decree is literally coming from the king, and the king is literally her husband. So why does she need to know all these details? Clearly, there is some sort of misconnect or sorry disconnect or miscommunication between the king and the queen. There's something going on, and that is reiterated at the end of verse 11. But with that being said, she could obviously tell that her uncle Mordecai is distressed. She can tell that her people, the Jews, are distressed. She can tell that. But based on the law of the country, which she knows, being the queen, she knows that it is it's very unprofessional, and it's also uh, very much against the law to go to the king without his request, basically. And so she makes that known to Mordecai. So it's basically saying, look, I would love to help, but I just don't know what I could do. I would love to step in. I'm trying to figure out what to do, but I can't really go to him as he is in the I believe the court. Yes, the inner court. As he is in the inner court, I can't just go to him there. And it gives you the sense that the inner court is where the business of the kingdom is actually taking place. So it's not like she would go to him not in the court itself to push forward some sort of business. So, with that being said, let's see how Mordecai responds um, in verse 12. Well, sorry. Okay, I do want to go back to the end of verse 11. When it says, "But as for me, I've not been called to come into the king these 30 days." It very well could be some sort of time of purification for Esther that is keeping her from the king for that long. That is totally possible. However, knowing that this is a pagan king, that this is the ancient Near Eastern culture as well, you have a lot of these kings have many wives and many concubines. And clearly, when I say pagan king, yes, there are many Israelite kings that also have multiple wives and multiple concubines, but overall, you can see that this is not a healthy relationship in any sort of way. It's not like the Lord is condoning this multiple wives or multiple concubines format. You can clearly see that there is some sort of tension between Queen Esther and King Ahasuerus because they have not seen each other for almost a month, if not a month itself. So, verse 12 and Mordecai's response. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" So, this response by Mordecai is both common sense but also this plea for her to really dig deep and find her courage and find her bravery, which she does with the help of the Lord, I believe, which I will get into on Thursday. But here, you have common sense in verse 13. It's like, look, at some point, you are going to be found out that you are a Jew. And when that day comes, with how quickly Vashti was thrown out of the queenship, once that day comes where you are found out, then why do you think you'll be fine? Especially if it takes 30 days for you and your husband to get together and to spend time together or whatever that might look like. But you can see the common sense drive that he puts forward with that. But then you have verse 14. And verse 14 is the main, I think, the thematic verse, the main verse of the whole entire book. So we'll look more at this on we'll look more at verse 14 on Thursday, but for now it is just this plea of, look, I need you to be brave. I need you to step up, because if you don't, somebody else will, but you will be long gone in a very bad way, and so will I. If it's Mordecai talking here, or sorry, since it's Mordecai talking here, he will be gone in a bad way as well. And so it's a very good response from Mordecai, and it's not, you know, pushing her down or forcing her to do anything. It is just bringing some really good things to the table and making her think about it. And Esther takes that advice. Verse 15. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So, Esther, again, being the queen, did not have to take Mordecai at his word. She did not have to do that. She is in a spot of authority over him. However, because of her love for her uncle on a familial plane, but also the respect and the honor that she has for him as he has for her, that comes into play as well. And so she's like, look, okay, go and spend time in prayer, go and spend time in fasting, which again, fasting is not just time where you don't eat or drink, but it's time where you really seek out the Lord. During the times where you are eating or you are drinking or those type of things, you spend that time in really just crying out to the Lord and asking for guidance, asking for help, whatever it might be with the situation that you are in. And this typically, fasting would go with sackcloth and ashes for that. Those things would often connect. So, what she asked for makes a lot of sense. And then you have this great line: "Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." What bravery and what courage she has. That Esther has in her life, and so Mordecai does that, and they start to fast and they start to pray. And so, with that being said, that then sets up for Esther's plan to get Haman's plan thrown out. And we will see that starting next week, because again, on Thursday, we will dive deeper into Esther 4:14, which we already read today, but we'll dive deeper into it and really see, why do we not see the Lord mentioned very much in this book. So we will get to that on Thursday, but thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today as we see the bravery of Esther, but also just the connection of Mordecai and Esther again. But thanks for spending a little bit of time here with me today. I will see you on Thursday. Thanks.